curse of the Wendigo. In the bitter winter of 1843, the small, isolated settlement of Willow's Hollow, nestled deep in the dense Canadian wilderness, was gripped by an otherworldly terror. The townspeople had heard tales of a monstrous creature that haunted the woods, but few believed that the Wendigo, the spirit of insatiable hunger and cannibalism, would cast its malevolent shadow over their lives. The relentless snowstorms had made it almost impossible to forage or hunt, and food supplies had dwindled to a dangerous low. Desperation grew as each snowflake fell, and a palpable tension simmered between the settlers. It was during these bleak times that the first whispers of the Wendigo began to spread, like a chilling wind sweeping through the settlement. Young Abigail, the daughter of the town blacksmith, was the first to encounter the horrifying beast. She had ventured to the outskirts of the village to gather firewood when she stumbled upon the mangled remains of a deer. The carcass was barely recognizable, torn apart and devoured with a savagery that could only be attributed to the Wendigo. Abigail's blood turned to ice in her veins as she gazed upon the grisly scene, and she sensed the presence of the unseen creature lurking in the shadows. She fled back to the village, her panicked breaths clouding the freezing air. No sooner had she shared her terrifying account than a feverish paranoia gripped the hearts of the townspeople. They were certain that the Wendigo had come to claim them all. They gathered in the town square, shivering from both cold and fear, as they debated what could be done to save their souls from the ravenous beast. It was at this moment that a mysterious stranger, an elderly man named Nathaniel, emerged from the shadows. He claimed to be a scholar who had spent years studying the legend of the Wendigo. He told the settlers of the creature's insatiable hunger for human flesh, its ability to possess the minds of the weak and desperate, and how it spread terror through whispers and shadows. The townspeople, desperate for answers and guidance, clung to his every word. Nathaniel warned that the Wendigo would prey upon their hunger and despair, and urged the settlers to maintain their faith and unity. He cautioned them to never speak the creature's name, lest they give it power. Most importantly, they must avoid the temptation to consume human flesh, for that would surely seal their fate and bind them to the Wendigo for eternity. Though initially skeptical, the townspeople heeded Nathaniel's advice. The days and nights blended together as the relentless storm raged on, and the freezing winds howled like the cries of the Wendigo itself. The settlers huddled together for warmth, their faces gaunt and their spirits low. They prayed for an end to the storm and the nightmare that stalked their settlement. But it was not long before the fragile peace shattered. The air grew colder, and an eerie silence descended upon Willow's Hollow. Abigail's father, the blacksmith, had gone missing. The townspeople scoured the surrounding woods, their lanterns flickering in the darkness like the last embers of hope. It was Abigail who found her father's remains, a horrific scene that would haunt her for the rest of her days. His body had been torn asunder, with bite marks that were unmistakably human. The townspeople were devastated by the grisly discovery, and they began to suspect one another of being the Wendigo's vessel. Fear and mistrust festered like a festering wound, and the once tight-knit community began to fracture. Amidst the chaos, Nathaniel remained a steadfast source of guidance, urging the settlers to remain strong and united in the face of the Wendigo's insidious manipulations. He believed that the creature could still be vanquished if they held on to their humanity and refused to succumb to the darkness. As the days dragged on, the storm continued to batter the village, and more townspeople went missing. Their mutilated remains were discovered in the woods, each more gruesome than the last. The once vibrant settlement had become a desolate wasteland, haunted by the howling winds and the unrelenting horror of the Wendigo. One fateful night, Abigail awoke with a start, a sense of foreboding weighing heavy on her chest. She peered out the frost-covered window and saw Nathaniel standing in the snow, staring off into the forest. She threw on her cloak and ventured out to confront him, her breaths creating puffs of fog as she demanded answers. The old man's eyes were hollow and distant, and he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "The Wendigo cannot be stopped," he murmured, his voice trembling. "It feeds on our despair and our hunger, growing stronger with every passing moment. We cannot hope to defeat it. We can only hope to survive." Abigail's heart clenched with fear as she realized the truth. Nathaniel was the Wendigo's vessel, and it had been guiding them all along, biding its time as it fed on their suffering. She backed away, her eyes wide with terror, and Nathaniel's gaze suddenly sharpened with an unnerving intensity. "There is only one way to save ourselves," he hissed, his voice no longer his own. "You must embrace the darkness, the hunger that resides within you. Join me, and the Wendigo will spare you." Abigail shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clung to the last shreds of her humanity. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I will not become a monster." With a guttural snarl, Nathaniel lunged at her, his fingers twisted into claws, his eyes wild and frenzied. Abigail stumbled back, her heart pounding in her ears as she fought to escape the grasp of the Wendigo. She stumbled through the snow, her legs trembling with exhaustion as the monstrous creature pursued her relentlessly. But the Wendigo had underestimated the strength of Abigail's spirit. Though weakened and near the brink of collapse, she managed to reach the heart of the village. There, in a final desperate act of defiance, she entered the hut that held the blacksmith's forge, where a small fire remained. The Wendigo, tethered to Nathaniel and Abigail's intertwined fates, entered a few moments later. Abigail grabbed her father's forging gloves and grabbed one of the burning logs from the fire, swinging it wildly at Nathaniel and the Wendigo. The Wendigo struck her on the arm, sending the log across the room into the kindling pile, which quickly became engulfed in flames. Then the spirit lunged at her once again, knocking her down onto the ground. Nathaniel and the Wendigo leapt onto Abigail, but not before she was able to reach to her side and grab a sharp chisel. She held the chisel up as they came crashing down on her, the chisel plunging deep into Nathaniel's side. Momentarily stunned from his injury, she managed to get out from under him and head for the door, the hut now becoming engulfed in flames and the temperature becoming unbearable. With the last of its strength, the Wendigo managed to stand once more and lunged through Nathaniel's body towards Abigail, landing on the ground and grabbing her leg. Abigail could not break free from his grip, and she knew that the Wendigo had to be stopped, so she threw herself onto his back where she held onto him, until finally the roof collapsed, pinning them in the smoke and fire. The flames devoured them. The Wendigo and Nathaniel screeched with their dying breath, their dark spirits entwined in a dance of death, and the villagers watched in stunned silence as the horror that had plagued them was finally vanquished. As the fire consumed the last remnants of the cursed creature, the storm began to abate, and the first rays of sunlight pierced the clouds, bathing Willow's Hollow in a warm golden glow. The surviving townspeople mourned the loss of Abigail and the others who had fallen prey to the Wendigo's curse. They vowed never to forget the sacrifices made to save their souls from the darkness. The legend of the Wendigo would live on in whispered stories and somber songs, a continual reminder of the evil that had once stalked their settlement, but also of the strength of young Abigail and her triumph over it. When you subscribe, be sure to click the notification bell. Click here for more true scary stories.